Hey, it's Lisa Rothman, the founder of StopFamilyConflict.com, here with another one in the series, I Can't Collaborate Because my children can't possibly know what is in their long-term best interest. And if I don't take forceful action now, they will be unhappy in the future and all sorts of avenues will be shut off to them. Now, this tension shows up in many different arenas. Toothbrushing, education. I'm going to focus on the areas that it shows up where language acquisition and musical instruments. I'm going to focus on those two because what you and I know is that typically it's much easier to become proficient or even excellent at speaking a language and learning a musical instrument when we're younger as opposed to when we're older. And so this idea of I need to force my child to learn this language or learn to play this musical instrument, I find this occurs a lot, and the attendant fear of my children will be unhappy with me if I do them this disservice of not really pressuring them to master a second or third language or learn to play this musical instrument. So that's what I want to focus on today. And it has come up for me with parents in a variety of ways, but most recently it came up because I was working with a mom who's thinking about having her son do music lessons because he's expressed some interest in music. He seems more interested in singing than playing the piano. She seems more interested perhaps in the piano. And she heard from a friend of hers who now plays the piano as an adult. It brings him great joy. He plays it at parties, much to his delight and everyone else's. He told her, he said, I'm so glad my parents forced me to learn to play piano. So that was an issue that arose. And then I was also speaking with a mom who is very interested. Her children's native language is not her native language. She would very much like them to learn her native language because not only for questions of, family heritage and ancestry, continuation of cultural lineage, but also it will create more career options in the future for her children. So she was talking about this pressure that she feels and the pressure that she's putting on her children to learn this second language that is her native language. And so this was all arising, and so I've been thinking about this, and I thought, okay, I want to share with you some thoughts about this. And on the one hand, I really get it, not wanting our children to miss out on something, and also wanting them to have as much ease as possible. Like, hey, if you can learn this language easily as a kid, if you can learn to play a musical instrument more easily, I want you to be able to take advantage of that as opposed to, really struggling later on. So I think a lot of parents do this because they really want to contribute to their children and their children not needing to struggle that much. But it can have some repercussions. So I want to talk about the best case scenario where this plays out, where the parents really pressure the kids, do not collaborate with the kids around whether they want to learn the language or continue with the music lessons, but really push it through. And so a best case scenario is, I think, in the situation like that mom I was working with, her friend who's grateful to his parents for forcing him to learn to play the piano. And I also, in terms of the language, I was speaking to a mother whose parents really pressured her to learn to speak Arabic. And now as an adult, she's very grateful that she speaks Arabic because when she goes to mosque, she can read along in the prayer book, and that has tremendous meaning for her, and she has a sense that it brings her closer to her religion. And if her sense is if her parents hadn't forced her to learn Arabic, this would not be her current situation. And that is why she is really forcing her child to learn Arabic as well. So I see those as two best case scenarios for how this plays out. And then I want to share some, I would call them sort of worst case scenarios. I know of another family where the mother is extraordinarily musically gifted, like concert pianist musically gifted, and had 3 children who are also similarly extraordinarily musically gifted. And with 2 of her children, she really pressured them because she saw so much potential for them in terms of what they could do with music. And this went on for years and years, and they, obeyed her, and they studied, and they were extraordinary musicians. But the pressure on them to continue and to perform at such a high level, at a certain point they rebelled and they were done, and she threw up her hands. And she's like, okay, it's up to you. And my understanding is they've quit music for good. They're done with it. They're like, nope, at least for now, nope, they're not doing it, and they have no plans of returning to it. Okay, so there we have sort of best case, worst case scenarios. And I want to introduce a third way and then talk about various outcomes. And I want to acknowledge that this third way gets much harder when we have a lot invested in our children doing the thing that we want them to do, either because we're passionate about it, we've seen that it has a tremendous amount of value in our life, we love doing it. This third way becomes much harder for us. But what it also allows the possibility for, it helps create the conditions for, is the child actually figuring out what's best for them, not only in this moment, but also building the skill about continuing to figure out and discern for themselves what's best for them with input and guidance from the parent. Because, in situations where there is resistance to language and music, or really any hobby or interest, I think that there are 3 possible things happening. Maybe there's more, but here are the 3 that occur to me. One possibility is the child just really can't stand it, doesn't want to learn that language, doesn't want to do that music, or just doesn't want to engage in whatever the hobby is. Second scenario, they're just not sure. They haven't made up their mind for themselves. And, they could, perhaps if they step away from it and reassess, and then they will return to it with clarity, oh, they do have intrinsic motivation. And then the third situation is they're not sure, and the intense pressure they're experiencing from their parent is making it very confusing for them to figure out what they actually want for themselves, and determining what they actually think is best for them in the moment and also going forward. So as we look at these 3 scenarios and what a third path, what this third path would look like. So for me, I'm going to diverge from the religion and the music and just say, as a kid, I was very clear. I was not interested in gardening. It was my father's great passion in life, and he thought that it was a moral failing on my part that I was not interested in it. Now, this is a situation where I absolutely did know what was best for me in the moment and going forward. I'm just not interested in gardening. And so a question, if the sense you get, or your child says, they have total clarity, I don't want to do this. The question for the parent, I think, is, do you want your child doing something that they are very clear that they don't enjoy? And if so, the invitation is to think long and hard about what need that meets for the parent and what they imagine the impact on the child is going to be in the short term as well as in the long term, in terms of what that's going to do in terms of their relationship, the child having a sense of trust with the parent, and also having, a sense of belonging and acceptance of themselves and what, their innate preferences are. A second possibility is that the child just isn't sure. And you can then help them get clarity for themselves about what they actually want to do. And I'm going to diverge from the language and the music piece because those were never issues for me and our family. But when it came to sports, my older son, he was passionate about golf for a couple of years, and then he he was done. He didn't want to do it anymore. And I checked in with him and I said, so are you sure this is, what you want to do for now? And he said, yeah, I want to let it go. And I was like, okay, if at any point you want to return to it, do. And I think that what was going on for him at that point was he'd been put into a more advanced class, and he was in over his head and there wasn't adequate support. And I did ask him if he wanted us to try to get him some more support. And he said he didn't. He just wanted to take a break. And I was like, okay, great. And I want to fully acknowledge that since I had no particular investment in whether he became a golfer or not, this was very easy for me to let him do. I can absolutely see that if I was a golfer myself and was looking forward to, us years in the future golfing together, this would be much harder for me to release. But what happened was he took a couple years off, and then he was like, you know what, I really want to go back. I want to get some extra support. And I mean, he's loved doing golf ever since, and he's always been very clear this is about his own intrinsic motivation with it. And then we have the third scenario where the child doesn't know, and the pressure from the parent is making it very, very difficult for them to discern what it is that they want to do. And in this, I want to reference this person, this mom who I'm working with. And she said, please use this as a case study, because she realized that the pressure she was putting on her son to learn her native language was miserable for her. It was miserable for him, and it just wasn't worth it. And she was so sick of all the nagging, and he was so sick of all the nagging. And so what she was able to do was actually shift out of he's not sure, and the pressure's, making it hard for him to figure out what he wants to do, to get him into a place of just being like, I'm not sure what I want. And what she did was she had this conversation with him in which she acknowledged, she said, I have been pushing you to do this, and I have a sense this isn't a full-bellied yes for you. So there she was inviting collaboration. And she said, I'm not going to go over all the reasons that I think it would be great for you to learn my native language, because I've gone over them countless times before, and I'm sure you've heard them all. The real question is, what do you want? And he thought about it, and he's like, I actually do want to learn. And she said, okay, so then I want to understand, what's going to happen with the homework, because you come, sometimes you leave the homework till the last minute, and then I'm tired. And so I'm not up for doing that. So if you want to continue, great, but I'm not going to be available to help you on a Sunday night. That's not going to work out. And he said, okay, he said, then I think it makes sense for me to do it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And she said, okay, so do you want a reminder about that? Or do you want me to just back off altogether? And he said, I want you to remind me. I do. Just remind me once and then back off. And she's like, okay. So here we have collaboration. And she said, and so how long do you want to try this out for? And he said, I'm willing to try it for a month, and then we'll check in again. And she said, okay, great. So look, this is a collaboration moment between the mother and the son. She was beaming with delight about what had happened, and she described it as a completely liberatory experience. She felt completely liberated. She felt so free. No longer was she this taskmaster forcing her son to do something against his will. She could see how this was helping him understand, figure out for himself what he thinks is in his best interest now and into the future. So as we now think about the worst case, the best case and worst case scenarios, and how this third path of collaboration might show up, the questions that I have as we think about the mom whose friend is grateful to his parents for forcing him to do piano, is we don't know what would have happened. It did come at a cost. He was clear he'd been forced. We don't know what would have happened if they'd said, okay, you want to take a break? We support it. And if you want to come back to it, do. We don't know what would have happened. We don't know what would have happened with the other situation with the musically gifted family if that mom had done that, where the kids, are not sure and the pressure from the mom is getting in the way is a distraction getting in the way. Perhaps if earlier on she said, okay, you're not wanting this. Up to you, and if you want to come back to it, we're never going to know what would have happened. All right, so here are some possibilities for collaboration for you when you think you can't collaborate because you think you know what's best in the long term for your kids. And if you want to take a deeper dive, please come to one of the Conflict Repair Cafes that I have. There's a link in the description of this video. All right, bye for now.